It's time.
It's time for a new episode of TMG.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to TMG. I'm your host, Travis Patton Sr. I enjoy discovering and sharing real-life moments of inspiration from everyday people. And this show is about finding moments of inspiration for our everyday lives. And look, and if you're going to tell me something, then tell me something good. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of TMG. That's Tell Me Something Good. I'm your host, Travis Patton Sr. Guys, I'm so excited to be here tonight, as I always am, and I'm glad you decided to join the show tonight. You know it's going to be a great one. Before we get started, you know how I like to do this thing, right? I want to kick the show off by giving huge pops and great support. My biggest fan, my lovely wife, Nicole. Girl, that's your shout out. I know you're watching. I know you're listening. Guys, I say this all the time at every show. This show has really taken off, and it's been heard in places all around the globe. Canada, France, Japan, God, just to name a few. If this is your first time tuning into the show, if this is your first time listening, thank you. And maybe you've been tuning in each week. Maybe you've been tuning in all along. Let me tell you, thank you for tuning in to the show, guys. I'm so glad that you're here. Guys, you know that this show is all about finding moments of inspiration in our everyday lives with everyday people like you and me. So if you have an inspiring story that you would like to share with our listeners, with our audience, guys, look at the email address that's right there on your screen. And I want you to send in your story, and maybe you'll get a chance to come on to the show and share your story with the audience. Guys, tonight's topic is absolutely amazing. Something I cannot wait to dive into. If you did not catch it, guys, tonight's story is Inbetween The Gap. Yeah, I know you want to know what in the world I'm talking about with that. Don't worry, we'll jump right into it because we got a special guest that's right there waiting to join in with us, guys. Listen, when we talk about Inbetween The Gap, let me just kind of jump right in there. Whether we fall short or fall on the other side of things largely depends on how well we manage the gaps in our lives. Yeah, let me say that again. Whether we fall short or whether we fall on the other side of things depends on how well we can manage the gaps in our lives. Things don't always come together as we expect them to. And sometimes they may require more effort from us than previously advertised. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. I appreciate that. So sometimes things may require more effort than we really advertise. And let's be honest about some things here, okay? Let's be honest here. Sometimes getting to the other side of things can look more like you're falling off a cliff than you're making it to the other side. Let me put up a picture of what I'm talking about. Sometimes making it to the other side can look just like this. Sometimes getting across our gaps can look just like this. It can look like we're about to fall. It can look like we're falling off a cliff, more so than making it to the other side. Life occurs in some of the most unusual places, but it happens when we are at least expecting it to. It may find us in transition, from one place in our lives to another. But listen to this, guys. But surviving the gaps, surviving the leap means accurately judging the gaps. Yeah, surviving the leap means accurately judging the gaps. Listen, guys, I have a very special guest that I'm going to bring on the show today. And I want you guys to give him a huge, huge TMG or welcome. This guy's name is Glen Williams. He is an absolute wonder. Glen Williams, he's 26 years in law enforcement and a detective. And I know that this man has seen a lot, has heard a lot. I'm going to stop running my mouth, and I'm going to let Glen come on and share and introduce himself. Glen, come on here and introduce yourself to the people. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Travis. And man, thank you for that upbeat entry, man. This is it's exciting to be here with you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So, we're glad that you are here. I am. The audience is. We're glad that you joined in. Glen, tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, I know you and I talked and we shared some stuff. Tell a little bit about yourself, Glen.
Well, start off, I was a police officer, detective for 26 years. During that time, I saw a lot of stuff that everyday cops see all the time, and it's stuff that rips your heart out. And I got a little bit traumatized, got PTSD, which is not unusual. If you see an officer out there that's had more than 4 or 5 years, he's probably got a little bit of PTSD. And I let it affect me. I did not know how to handle it back then because we didn't know about those things. And I started displaying behaviors that are common with PTSD. Not talking, anger.
Wow.
And there's a whole bunch of others that I talk about in my book. I created gaps in my relationships and ended up divorced. And, I'm a slow learner. I tried it again and I ended up divorced twice.
Oh, wow.
So the second time I was up at my cabin, I lived up there by myself for 3 years. And I learned to get back in touch with who I really am. I let the job become my life instead of just my job.
Absolutely,
and
man.
It overtook everything. And it took me 3 years to figure things out a little bit. I had some help with some counselors and therapists, and you can't be afraid to talk to people.
Say that part again, Glen. That last part.
Yeah, you cannot be afraid to talk to people.
Absolutely.
And while I was up there, I actually came up with an idea on a class that I travel around now and I teach to police departments. So if you know any police departments that want communication relations to help reduce PTSD, divorce, and suicide, that's what I do now.
Wow.
And I was sitting in bed I woke up one morning about 6 o'clock, and all of a sudden stuff started coming in. And I grabbed a notebook and a pen and I started writing, and I wrote for 4 hours, and I don't even remember what I wrote. But I'd been talking to a therapist friend of mine, and I showed it to her, and she says, "Wow, you're 60% done. Finish it now." Yeah. And then, so it took me about 6 months to finish it. And then out of that came my book, Bridging the Gap, and hence the name, because the gaps I created, I had to bridge. And I got really, really lucky, and I got a third chance. But the only reason I got a chance was because I changed me.
Wow.
And I got back in touch with who I am.
Wow.
And once I did that, I started opening up. My second wife would say, "Oh, you just surface talk." And she was right. Because I was hiding so much shit. I didn't want them to worry about me going to work. I mean, I've been almost run over by a car. I've gone through a door when shots are being fired. Then I had little babies that I had to pick up and try to save, and I couldn't do it. And those are the things that I did not want to share. And so we, now I have a wonderful relationship with a beautiful lady. She just
fantastic,
yes,
man.
Lets me spoil her, and she knows everything. We have zero secrets, 100% open and honest, and that's what I love.
Man, that's fantastic, guys. Listen, I'm listening to you, Glen, and what I heard, some of the things I heard were pivotal to where a lot of us are right now. The first thing was we cannot be afraid to talk to someone. And Glenn, you know what? That's where a lot of us are. I'm be honest with you. That's where I was with a lot of things that I struggled with. A lot of things, Glenn, that I had problems with, whether it was pride, whether it was arrogancy, whether well, I'm a man, I don't need help, blah. Rub some dirt on it and walk it off, so to speak, kind of attitude, or I'll get over, or put your big girl pants or your big boy pants on. Something, listen, everything does not go away because we wish it away. You understand what I'm saying? We have to reach out beyond ourselves. When you think about your book, Bridging the Gap, when you think about a bridge, it actually extends from one side to the other side. It has to go, it has to touch one side and touch the other side. Otherwise, it's not a bridge. It's not. It has to touch both sides. So the people that we're trying to bridge that gap with, we have to touch them. And listen, the mountain doesn't move. We have to meet the mountain where it is. So enough of waiting for people to change. You have to meet the person where they are.
When I talk in my class, I talk about the ripple effect. And I wrote this book and did my class mainly to help our personal families.
Right.
But what I've discovered is if I change me and I changes my family, and then that ripples out to work, and then that ripples out to the community, and then pretty soon we're having open, honest relationships with everyone. And that is what we need to get rid of many of the problems that we're having today.
You're right, man. I heard someone say this, my mentor say this, we can't get results until we get real.
Yeah.
We want results, but we don't want to be real about it. We have to get real with who we are first, and then we can get the results in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in the society that we're in. We have to get real in order if we want to get results. And if we're not doing that, then what are we doing, man? We're not bridging the gaps. We'll talk about the bridge, but we'll never build it. The bridge comes when real work gets done. And you know what? You know why a lot of times that bridge? Because a real bridge, Glenn, requires real work. It requires effort. It requires sweat. In other words, guys, if you want to build that bridge, it's going to take some effort. You're going to have to sweat this one out. You're not going to wish it. You got to sweat it.
Yep. And it's going to take something that most people are afraid to do.
What?
Look inside yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man.
And take a self-accountable look. And that's one of the things I discover. Most of the guys I talk to, they're not afraid to go into danger, but they are afraid to look at themselves. I had one guy, it was interesting in a class. He was sitting in the back, arms folded. So, he's putting up the walls.
Right.
And he says, I don't tell my family anything about work. And I looked at him and says, you don't tell him anything. And he says, nope. And I said, would you agree that we are people are creatures of habit? And he says, yes, absolutely. Okay. So you're not telling your family anything about 60 to 70% of your waking life.
Exactly.
And that's without overtime and extra duty. 60% of your waking life, you're not sharing. What else aren't you sharing?
Whoa. Deep. That's deep.
Can't have a relationship if it's not two-way open.
It's like that. It's like that gap. It's like that gap we showed in the beginning. It's got to be a two-way. It can't be all on one side. Otherwise, it's not a bridge. It's not a bridge. And guys, when we're talking about bridging the gaps, we're talking about the things that we face in our everyday lives, our relationships, our careers, our family, our loved ones, the everyday life, bridging those gaps that in between, balancing life and career, balancing life and relationship, balancing who you are with and against the expectations that people have on you. Bridging those gaps.
And many times it's the expectations we have on ourselves.
Say it, man. Say it. Now you're talking.
Biggest wall we've got.
Absolutely. You hitting it right on the head. Glenn, You share, and we've been talking about this now for a few moments. You share a message kind of about bridging the gap. In your book, you share that also, but you share this message about bridging, and I can just hear your passion behind that, man. Are you able to share with us what that means to you about bridging the gap? I heard you mention you had some difficulties with PTSD, and you had some different, and it kind of trickled down into your life. Or can you kind of share with us some of the instances? What did that mean with you about bridging the gap?
Part of it was back when I was working. If you had a problem and you wanted some help, they found you unfit for duty and you're pretty much let go.
Oh, wow.
And, I was raised in a small farm town and I was taught I'm a guy. I got this. I don't need help.
Exactly.
And suck it up, buttercup. You don't talk about that bad shit. You just let it go and deal with it.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it.
Yeah. And, that's just a typical, the way we were raised. And I'm sure what I've discovered is probably about 75 to 80% of the guys in America are raised that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we shut down, we don't talk, and we forget how to express feelings. And there, like I say, that some of the instances I had at work, I didn't share with my spouse.
Mhm.
And in reality, the reason I didn't want her to worry.
Correct.
But
Correct, man.
in reality, I didn't want to relive it.
Wow. Wow.
And by doing that, I got in that habit. And for probably almost 20 years, I didn't share until I ended up the cabin by myself. And then I had time to just lay there and think. Now, I started drinking too much. That's a thing, a PTSD thing. Now, I was a good kid. I only, I limited it to 2 drinks a night, but they were 32 ounces each.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, each. So, I'm looking at a lot of gin and tonic there, or whiskey or whatever it was that night. But I felt numb. I didn't feel any pain. And I had nightmares a lot for a long time. I'm down maybe 1 or 2 a year now. So I used to have 2 or 3 a month. Things that I had seen and that still bothered me.
Right. Stuff you've experienced, man.
Yeah. And by opening up, I found a therapist, and that was my first, and I paid for it on my insurance. I went on my own. But I started talking, and then they started coming out. Now there's peer support teams, which are awesome.
Correct.
There's
Absolutely.
the officers that are trained to listen and to help you work through the thing, because they can't work through it for you.
Correct, man.
And that's what really taught me a lot about things I believe, self-accountability. And so I got to look inside me. Okay, what am I doing to create this? I got divorced twice. What did I do to create those problems?
Absolutely.
And when I got looking at that, the biggest issue was I didn't talk. I didn't share anything. I didn't show feeling. I didn't, nothing. Like, I was sitting on the couch one night and I had my wife and 3 kids there, and we're all watching a comedy, and I can't even remember what it was, but they're rolling on the floor laughing.
Uh-huh.
And my son looks up at me. He was in junior high, and he looked up at me and says, "Dad, don't you think this is funny?"
Ooh.
And I looked at him and said, "Oh yeah, it's funny." He says, "Well, then why aren't you laughing?" And I looked at him and said, "Oh, I'm laughing on the inside."
No way.
That's what I said. And I was so full of shit. I look back on that now, and I had shut down so much that I wasn't even laughing at a hilarious show. And those are obviously, it's kind of, when you shut down that much, it's hard to have a good relationship.
Correct.
And I sat there and I lied to my son. I wasn't laughing on the inside. I was just zoned somewhere else. And I was not in the moment with my family. And that's the other thing that I've learned to be is enjoy the journey. Don't focus on the end, because you'll get there eventually, but the journey is where you learn and have fun.
Absolutely.
So be in the moment, one step at a time.
Guys, you hear that? And I'm kind of big on that. I'm trying to learn that as well, Glenn, to make sure that I'm in the moment. You can't worry about the next moment, what happens next, what's going to happen next week, next year. But right now, you're in this moment. Enjoy that moment that you're in.
Yeah.
Because if we don't begin to enjoy that moment, what happens is that moment becomes a memory.
And then we shut down.
And then we shut it down. Because you know what? we forget it.
Yeah.
Because there's no emotion. And here's what I've learned from a therapist: when we attach an emotion to a memory, there's a huge probability we will recall it. That's what's called a long-term memory. If we do not attach an emotion to memory, we'll soon forget it. To a moment,
Yep.
we'll soon forget it. For instance, if you lose your keys and you laugh a lot about it, the next time you lose your keys, you start laughing. Oh, I remember when I lost my keys, blah, 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 10 years ago, blah, you'll remember it. But if all you remember is you'll forget it. And what happens is a lot of times we lose that opportunity to treasure, to garner, to earn and obtain a moment because we are so disengaged. And whether it because social media we're disengaged, because of life just happening, we're disengaged. But we have to begin to enjoy the moment that we're in. And I'm not saying every moment is going to be worth enjoying. It's going to be an enjoyable moment. But take a deep breath, take a step back, and find something to enjoy. If you can't enjoy the moment you're in, find something else to enjoy, because life goes on whether we want it to or not. And regardless of if it's raining on one side of town, it may be sunshine someplace else, you know?
Yep.
So I love that, man.
It's so important. And, the being in the moment, because the future depends on what we do right now.
I love that.
What we do right now, and the past doesn't matter because it's gone. You use it for a learning opportunity.
I like that.
I see so many people, not so much anymore because I'm not as young as I once was, but they're living in the past. Oh, I had a great job, or I was a phenomenal high school athlete, or
Right,
blah, blah,
right,
blah,
man.
blah.
Right, man.
Okay, great. And so are about 150 billion other people. So what are you doing right now? What are you doing right now?
This very moment. This is all that matters. All that matters. Man, jeez. When we're talking about, this is so deep when talking about bridging the gap, man, we're talking about not overlooking any experience we've had, but at the same time, taking that experience to move forward, to go to the next step, the next plane. Man, this is so good. Guys, I know you're enjoying it. I know you are. I'm really enjoying this myself. Guys, I want to do something real quick. I got to do this really fast, so that you will know that I'm doing this. Guys, I want to take a moment, guys, right here to plug one of my sponsors, Walmart. What? Walmart? Yeah, I told you. Walmart sponsors TMG. Guys, I'm going to put a link into the chat. If you click that link, I want you to understand I may earn a commission when you buy through that link. I am not asking you to send me any money. I'm not asking you to give me or any coins. All I'm saying is do what you normally do. Go shopping. But use that link when you do go shopping. Guys, remember, that link will be in the chat for you to use. Please click it. Whether you're doing Valentine's Day shopping or you're doing grocery store pickup, does not matter. I'm going to put that link in the chat for you to guys use and do some shopping. Back to the show. So, Glenn, I had to put that plug in there, man. I had to put that plug in there. So, Glenn, you said you've been in law enforcement, man, for 26 years. 26 years in law enforcement. And as a detective, you've obviously, man, you've seen a lot in those years. That's 26 years is what 3 presidential terms, and going on 4 presidential terms. So you've seen a lot. How well were you able to manage those gaps in your own personal life, or were you able to?
Well, back then I wasn't able to. In fact, I created them. I'm the one that shut down and didn't talk. And one of the things, what I discovered actually just recently was PTSD. There's a lot of thrill seeking. And I look back now, and I was in a lot of foot chases and fights, and I look at the ones that I talked myself into without even realizing I was doing it.
Wow.
Like somebody challenged me. Oh, it's on. It's on. because I stayed in good shape because I was not going to let some young punk beat me in a foot race. And I didn't lose.
Wait a minute, Glenn.
Well, my
What's
father
that?
was a coach. I'm a little competitive. But
Glenn said, no, you're not beating me.
no, not at all. If you run from me, it's like putting a hubcap of a car in front of a dog. But
So don't try to run from Glenn, is what he's trying to say.
yeah, that was that. Now I'm a little smarter. But it was interesting, and having an affair is not unusual either, because that's the biggest thrill you can take.
Mm-hmm.
Putting my thing that's most important to me, my family, at risk.
Exactly.
And people do it without even realizing. And I did it once. Will never happen again. And but I paid the price on that. And that wasn't why I got divorced. There was a lot of other things in there, but at the time, that was a hidden thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting on the thrill part of it. And that's, like I said, it's something I regret. I can't change it, but I definitely have learned. There's news, there's good news, and there's educational opportunities. Is how I look at it. There's no such thing as bad news. And so I learned. And I'm still learning. I mean, it's amazing. I heard some of this stuff like 3 or 4 months ago at a conference I went to.
Huh?
And I had no idea it was even related until 3 or 4 months ago. And so it's kind of interesting. But now I'm able. My wife, she looks at my face and she knows what I'm thinking. I have opened myself up so much, and she says sometimes you are too open. And I said, do you want me to change? And she says, nope.
Nope, not one bit.
And I appreciate that. But what the other thing is kind of interesting is it's opened me up enough that all of a sudden I started doing creative things like writing a book.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm writing 2 more, and I have about 7 projects in line. So eventually I'll have probably 10 or 12 books out, and some of them are actually fiction and just fun, and some of them are let's fix a problem. But those are things that I never dreamed of, never thought of until after I got to change me.
Wow. And so I heard, I don't want to go into your projects just yet. I don't want to talk about your projects just yet. And
Yeah.
you're so open in what you're doing, and all that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, guys, about bridging the gap.
Yep.
The gap. If we stay like this, there's always going to be space between us.
Yep.
Someone has got to take this leap of faith. Someone has got to do this. Before the bridge gets built, before the bridge gets built, someone has got to meet someone on the other side. Someone has to go survey and meet. What this picture represents is meeting someone where they are. That's what it represents. And even though it can feel like we're falling, it feels like we're being vulnerable. Because when you do build that bridge, you're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to feel like, well, I'm not going to be made a sucker. Nobody's going to make a fool out of me again. And it's more difficult to do so after hurt, pain, trauma, PTSD. It becomes more difficult to do that. But there comes times we have to take that leap of faith and be willing to do so. Look, let me ask you a question, man. So I know you've been doing some different things. So when did you begin to accept or realize, because I heard you say this earlier, when did you begin to accept or realize that you needed help with what was happening in between the gaps of your life? And what are some things that helped turn things around for you and helped you kind of make it to the other side of things?
The first experience was, I mentioned having to pull a young child out of a pond, and
you gotta share that one. I heard that. I'm gonna need you to share that one.
That experience, I was about a 17-year officer at the time, and when I got out of that, I was hurting bad, and I had a good leader, a lieutenant, that came over, and he looked at me, and he and I are friends to this day. But he says, "Are you okay, brother?" And for the first time in my life, 17 years in law enforcement, I looked at him and I said, no, I'm not. And so that's the thing is we get to reach out and help other people.
Exactly.
That will also help us. By giving, we gain. And he gave, and he helped me out. And he says, don't worry about your report, brother. He says, go take care of yourself. And I went and found a church parking lot, backed up against a brick wall. And I sat there in my car and I bawled my eyes out for about an hour. And then I pulled myself together and went back and got the rest of my days done. But those are things that many times we don't have the opportunity. We just have to go from one call to the next, to the next, to the next.
You're right. You're right, man. You're right.
And so it builds up and builds up. But that was the first time I ever let it out. And that was the beginning. I had an idea then. Again, I worked for 9 years after that. And when I really started changing, I slowed down. I retired after 20 years, and then I went to work for the transit police for 6 years. And that was a wild ride. But
I can imagine it was.
Oh man, yeah, a whole different clientele. But I go through the trains. Tickets, please. Tickets, please. Tickets, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's because it was a numbers game. The more people you checked, the more you found without tickets. The more people without tickets, the more people with warrants you found. The more warrants you found, the more times you went to jail.
Oh, good grief. And
so that was hurrying our way through. I had an experience where one guy, he was about 6'3", probably weighed 6'2", maybe, probably weighed about 280, big guy. And we rode the trains by ourselves at that time. And so I got him off the train because a car can't come to help you on a moving train. They'll never catch you. And got him off on a train platform and was going through, and he was giving me fake information. You know,
give you the guff. Yeah.
And luckily I had a good dispatcher, and she called me. I had an earpiece, and she says, by the way, I figured out who this guy is. I checked his picture because they had cameras. And he's got a 2nd-degree felony for aggravated assault on a police officer.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah, that's assault with a deadly weapon. And I'm going, oh, okay, this is going to be fun.
This is going to be exciting.
Yeah, so I gave her the code to get me back up started. And he didn't know what it was. And I gave her the code, and then I started stalling like crazy. And I went back and said, okay, they're not finding your name. Let me make sure I got everything spelled right. And I'm talking like really slowly. Spell me your name, please. And we went through, and I had him spell his name, his address, all the stuff he gave me, and verified his birth date. And went through, and finally he kind of started going, okay, something's going on here.
Yeah, at the while, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So then I had to take him into custody, and I still had no backup. I went, put him in custody, and the fight was on. Everything in my shirt pockets, everything that I had on me went flying. My sunglasses, my sight book, my cell phone, my work cell phone, my handcuffs. I mean, everything went flying. And then he turned, and I got my taser out. And for the first time in my career, I was going to use my taser. And it hit him right in the top of the chest. But the bottom prong bounced off his 2-inch wide leather belt, so it did not work.
Nothing at all. Wait, nothing at all.
Nothing at all. He just looked at me, and then he turned to run. And so I had to chase him. And, I ended up not getting hurt. And I had a truck driver jump out of a truck and help me hold him down until my backup finally showed up about 10 minutes later. And we got him into custody. Well, that was going through the process I've been going through. About 8 months later, I ran into another guy, same situation, not as big, and he's sitting on the train. And now we're riding pairs because we're getting in too many fights.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, so the guy, I'm writing him a ticket, but I slowed myself down. And as I went through the trains, I got rid of my sunglasses and I looked people in the eyes. I scanned their waistband first, made sure I was safe, their hands, but I'm going, tickets, please. And then we go work through and have a nice day, take care, and actually started connecting with people.
Right.
Yeah. And this guy looks up and I said, I'm writing him a citation. He looked at me and he says, "You're being way too nice." I said, "What?" He says, "You're making this difficult. You're being way too nice." And I said, "Making what difficult?" He says, "I was going to kill a cop today and hopefully die doing it."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I said, "Okay, stay where you're at. Keep your hands on your knees for me, please. And we're doing good here, bud. Let's just keep this up, okay?" And he says, "Yeah, okay." I said, "How are you going to do it?" And he says, "I have a knife." And I pulled a butcher knife that it was so sharp I was afraid to put it in my cargo pants or my pocket my pocket, so I thought it cut through.
That large, my God, that's a machete.
Yeah, it was like a 6-inch blade on it. And I said, "Anything else?" And he goes, "Yeah, the other pocket." I pulled out a sharpened screwdriver that he'd shanked. And anyway, he was having some issues, suicidal. So that means get a call fire, get him transported up to the hospital. And he went through the psych ward, and then he went to some rehab for about a year. And he came back about a year later and ran into my sergeant on the train. Now he's got a 6-figure job working in a high-rise
Whoa.
in town.
So,
yeah.
A 6-figure job now?
Yeah. He got back on his meds, and he got over the stuff that was going on, the mental issues.
Awesome.
Under control. He did well. And he ran into my sergeant and he says, "Hey, tell Williams, thank you for saving my life." Now, 2 identical situations, really. But the difference was the second one I connected, and that's where I was starting to make that change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And notice what he said, guys. And listen, a lot of us right now, we're thinking like, wow. We're thinking, what in the world would we have done in a situation like that? And it goes back to what I said earlier in that picture. We got to meet, we got to connect with people where they are. And and a lot of times we want to do some construction on people. We want to build people, make people different, make people better. But first, before we do all that, Glenn, we got to meet them where they are.
And we start that by healing ourselves first.
Exactly. Listen. My son Marcus, he's probably one of the biggest Michael Jackson fans in the world. I promise you. Oh God. And The Man in the Mirror is a song Michael Jackson made. And we have to begin working on the person that we see every day, not the one that people see, not that representative. No. The one that when we're at home by ourselves or in our car by ourselves, that person we face in the mirror every day, the one that we cannot escape, that's the first bridge we have to cross. We have to cross that first bridge with ourselves, with the things we have learned, the things we have told ourselves about ourselves, the things that we have believed that weren't healthy, that weren't positive about ourselves.
And that is the key right there, because the head and the ego tell us why things won't work. And they do all these things to protect us. And if we're coming from that, it's never going to work. You got to get out of that and get into your heart, brother. Get into your heart and come with love. And that's the whole difference in the world.
I'm giving you a high five on that one right now, man. Absolutely, because that's where it starts, man. Listen, you mentioned earlier that you have a couple of books out. I know you do. One of them is called A Sweet Life, and I'm actually going to bring you back for that one. So that one's good because and we talked why that one's dear. It's about Sweet Life, which is about living with diabetes. Yeah, I told you, my grandson, at 1 year old, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and you shared with your daughter. And so we had a really good conversation. So I really want to hear about that next time you come on the show. So you might as well go ahead and get it geared up because you will be back, because I want to talk about that one. And the one you got behind you, Bridging the Gap. Tell us a bit about that book, my friend.
This is the one that the class that I wrote kind of turned into this book. And this is my story of all the things that I didn't do, or the things that I did that did not work, and how I would do them differently now. And I give resources, and it's all cop stories because that's my background. But I discovered, especially after COVID, it's for anybody with trauma that's experienced trauma, and everybody's experienced trauma in their life.
Everyone. Yeah. And on some level, on some form, it is. And let me share this with you. Trauma doesn't have to be where someone's physically abusing you. Okay. You know what? Sometimes the trauma can be if we never experience a real yes in our life. If all we've ever had was no, 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 then we'll be afraid to try something because we said, well, they're going to tell me no anyhow. Everybody always tells me no. Trauma can be an emotional and a mental thing. It could be something that we begin to tell ourselves every day about ourselves. We can listen, guys. I'm telling you, this is true. We can begin to traumatize ourselves by the
Yep.
things that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Sometimes you don't need somebody on social media to post something. You don't need family or friends or loved ones, or as they say, haters, to post anything. Listen, you don't need a hater if you're saying it yourself.
We are hardest on ourselves.
Absolutely, man.
And
We are the
we've got,
hardest.
well, it's like when I wrote my book, the other book that I have, Sweet Life, will be coming out. I'll be submitting to a publisher in the next 6 months. It's not quite done yet. But when I wrote this book, they wanted the full manuscript. That was in November. And I had it done. I had to do some submission paperwork, which is about 10 or 12 pages that they require. And I had everything done except endorsements.
Mm.
And the endorsements, they wanted 3. I only had 2. And my mind's telling me they're not good enough. They're not good enough. They're not good enough. And I sat there. That was in January, had that done. And I sat there and I let internal fear hold me back until finally the following November, I turned it in. But I used a trick I learned. I woke up in the morning and I said, I'm going to go down and finish it. I only have 20 minutes worth of work.
I know, right?
In my head, and it takes your mind about 5 seconds to come up with an objection. So I did a countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I went down to my laptop, opened it up, typed it up. 20 minutes later, hit send on my email, and it was submitted. And that was on a Thursday. I got a call on Friday, and the guy says, I'd love to talk with you sometime next week and explain the process to you. And I said, great. I work Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, so let's do it on Wednesday. We spoke on Wednesday, and he says they meet on Thursday once a week to see what books they're going to accept.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to send you, this is the process. And he explained the whole process to me. And then he said, I'm going to send you a sample contract. That way you're familiar with it in case they do offer you a contract.
Okay. Okay.
So I was working out my garage on Friday about 11 o'clock or so in the morning sometime. And I didn't have my phone with me. So I got back in and I had a message and I saw it was the guy from the publisher and I went, oh, okay. And he left me a really nice message. He says, hey, congratulations. They accepted your book.
Woo!
I'm going to send you a real contract instead of a sample one. And so I called him back and we talked, but I delayed by 9 months out of fear that I wasn't good enough when I was good enough. And it took 1 week and it was under contract.
Guys, I might want, that's a whole nother show. Being delayed by fear. We talking about right now. There are people that's listening, and guys, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to show your hands, jump in chat or not, but fear is one of the biggest things that will delay us, and it will tell you that you are not, in this case, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. They don't want you anymore. It's not that you're too old. You're too young. You don't know enough. Man, listen, jump out there. At this point, you already survived the pandemic. You've already survived worse things than this. At this point, you're in the middle of the air. You might as well jump out there. Of all the things that you have endured in your life, you may as well jump. You've already had people talk about you. You've already had people lie on you. You've already felt insecure. You might as well jump at this point. At this point, it's too late to stand on the other side and let somebody else do it, and you wish you had jumped. Glenn said, man, he rushed to his laptop, and I know why you rushed. You said, I'm not going to give myself a chance to talk myself out of it again.
Yep.
Because if I stay here, listen, just hit me. If I stay here, I'm going to stay here.
we all build these tiny little boxes around ourselves to quote unquote protect ourselves. And in reality, it's simply walling us in. So another
Man,
message I have is
what you say.
expand your horizons and get outside that stinking box. And there's a whole world out there that we don't experience out of internal fear or talking ourselves out of it. And are the experiences always good? There's no such thing as bad. That's an educational opportunity.
I like that. Guys,
But when we have, when we have the good news, oh man, is it freaking awesome.
There are no bad opportunities, guys. There's educational opportunities. Guys, listen, Glen, tell everybody what's your website. I'm gonna put it in chat. What's your website for everybody?
www.gdubauthor.com. That's gdubauthor.com. Played football with the guy.
gdubauthor.com. There you go. Guys, that's his website.
I can say played football with a guy. He was J-Dub and I was G-Dub.
Oh, wow. We're not J. We're talking to G-Dub. G-Dub, guys. G-Dub. I put the website in chat. Everybody, please check out on his book. Hold your book up again there so everybody can see that if you don't mind, Glen.
It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Kmart and there's another one I can't remember now.
There you go. Let me go. Big picture right there, guys. Let me blow it up for you. There you go. Bridging the Gap. An inside look at communications and relationships after traumatic events. Man, listen, dealing with things that have brought some form of trauma in our lives is important. It's very important. But tragic moments don't necessarily have to be where our story ends. We can get to the other side of things. Guys, I want to thank our very, very special guest, Glen Williams, for being with us on the show. Glen, any parting words you would like to say to someone who may be facing some of the things that you did? Any kind of advice you want to provide to someone?
First off, write it down. If you don't want to share it, write it down, because then you're sharing it with yourself, and that lets your mind know it's okay to share eventually. Then get to the point where you're sharing it with somebody. And then the third thing is take a risk and just go do something you've never, ever done before.
That's what I'm talking about, Glen. Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about right there. Guys, listen, join us next week. We will have another special guest next week. You won't miss next week, guys. It's going to be even just as good. I promise you. Listen to me. So join us next week, 6:30 Central Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and now soon going to be TikTok as well, guys, live. I want to thank our special guest, Glen Williams. Guys, give him a hand clap for joining us today on TMG. And guys, so you know it's that time. And as always, it's been a real blast. Look, don't forget to visit our YouTube page. That's Tell Me Something Good with the capital D. And don't forget to tune in right here each Thursday at that time at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern to listen to the show. And you can stream your favorite episodes on your favorite streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, and so many others. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, in parting, if you're going to tell me something, then tell me something good. I'm out of here. And I know you guys are waiting on that music. I'm going to hit that music. Don't you worry about that.